new revelation that the U.S. Office of Special Counsel is going to be looking into Jack Smith's probe and prosecution of President Trump in relation to alleged Hatch Act violations. Now, the Hatch Act is U.S. law that prevents government officials from engaging in certain partisan political activity.
Overall, long-term for our elections in the United States of America, people wanted to see action taken, investigations being done to know if the idea that this was potentially wrongdoing by these individuals, whether it was Jack Smith, appointed just days before President Trump announced that he would be running for re-election. And again, you go from Russia and you look at that matter now being investigated. Now you look at the special counsel's office. It's a bit of a different start to the investigation. But what I think is so important here is for how many years people, ACLJ supporters, listeners to this broadcast, people who watch the broadcast of the show, have been waiting for those who have carried out these actions, which we believe were wrong and potentially illegal in interfering with our elections. When would they be held accountable? When would we even start the investigations? And now, still, I know it's hard to say, still pretty early on into this second Trump administration, we are starting to see the beginning of those investigations. That doesn't mean, and I don't want to put too much weight to say that this means everybody's going to jail, because I think that that's the jump. But I will say this, the difference here is that in the past, when we were investigating these or defending these, as I was part of that legal team for President Trump, when it came down to the Russia information, the Mueller team and all of that, that we did not have prosecutorial power.
Right.
The Trump administration does. The DOJ does ultimately have prosecutorial power. Now, through the special counsel office, it's a two-step process to go there, but they've got plenty of time, even in this one term of President Trump, to do the investigation. And if they believe charges should ultimately be brought into court, they can do so. And that is a big change from where we were just a year ago, where we could say this was wrong, we could have investigations, but ultimately, people may be even getting fired, but ultimately it would be more difficult to see actual justice get done. This time around, I think that we actually have a much better chance of seeing people being held accountable.
Attorney General Merrick Garland waited to appoint the special counsel. It's not like this investigation that he was originally tasked with, the January 6th investigation and also the Mar-a-Lago raid, those happened earlier on. Obviously, January 6th happened before Biden was even president.
They need to wait until President Trump was deciding to run again 4 years later.
And they are so obvious with their motives that this isn't about actually seeking justice. This isn't actually about an investigation we think that the American people need. It was all because of politics. And that's why this is a necessary investigation. Now, that, as we mentioned, the Hatch Act violation from this U.S. Office of Special Counsel isn't something they would prosecute. And Jack Smith is no longer a government lawyer. But they could also refer their findings over to the DOJ if they see that these are violations of the law that could be criminal in nature that could be prosecuted.
Right. And that's what's important here is that ultimately the Office of the Special Counsel can refer this to the Department of Justice for potential criminal prosecution. So they have to find the wrongdoing on their end, and if they believe that wrongdoing went to even the next level, they pass that off and they encourage the Department of Justice to open an actual criminal investigation. So it's a little different than what you guys were talking about last week with Comey and with Brennan. This is more of a two-step process, but still a very important process for the rule of law in our country.
What we're seeing here is one, already, the Democrats trying to make this about Trump weaponizing independent agencies, which is a whole other rabbit trail we could go down about how the bureaucracy tried to isolate themselves from the president and being able to actually govern the country. But these independent agencies that the Democrats are now saying President Trump is weaponizing. What we need to also let people know, this investigation stems from Senator Tom Cotton asking for an investigation into this. It wasn't President Trump that directed this office to do this investigation. It was a U.S. senator who laid out a very compelling case of why this needs to be looked at. the U.S. Office of Special Counsel isn't a special counsel under the DOJ, which is appointed by the Attorney General to have independence over maybe a politically interesting or dicey kind of investigation that could look like there's some sort of retribution. So they have a special counsel that can be dedicated to that team. This is an office that primarily it investigates things like whistleblower protection. They try to protect whistleblowers, the Hatch Act, which is where there's partisan political activity, and other things regarding really the employment rights of bureaucrats and people within the government.
That's right.
And they also don't have prosecutorial power, Jordan.
No, they have power to seek disciplinary action for federal employees, but they don't have the power to bring those employees or former employees to court, to a traditional court on criminal charges. What they can do is make a referral to the Department of Justice team that can do that. And that's the Department of Justice led by the Attorney General Pam Bondi. So President Trump's choice for Attorney General. So they're in a very different situation right now. So while this is kind of a two-step process, separate from the process looking at Brennan and Comey, which is a one-step process because that's DOJ directly looking at criminal wrongdoing. This would be a 1-2 step. And the reason why here is you first start with the Hatch Act, which prevents federal government officials from taking actions that would impact or try to impact federal elections. And in this matter, what they're saying is when you look at the timeline, when you look at the race to try and bring this to court, when you look at the fact that he's appointed 3 days before, it was, I'm quoting here, Jack Smith's legal actions were nothing more than a tool for the former President Biden and former Vice President Harris campaigns. Isn't just unethical, it could be illegal campaign activity from a public office. That's from Senator Tom Cotton. So this is so important to me for our election integrity moving forward in our country because let's just be honest. We're not going to have President Trump again on the ballot. He was unique and is unique in his ability to take this incoming fire from kind of every side possible. So you want to make sure that these bad actors or potential bad actors know that if you try to do this again, there will be serious consequences. And I think that's the big goal for the American people, is that we don't just brush this under the table and say, oh, this was bad, this happened, but we moved on and we actually ended up winning again. So we know this strategy, if it's not stopped now, as something that is very dangerous to take on for those who want to try and utilize it to undermine, typically it would be conservative candidates, people who want to shake up Washington, D.C. And if you look at the current state of the Republican Party right now, the Republican Party is dominated by those kind of individuals, the kind that want to shake up the bureaucracy and shake up Washington, D.C., that you can't employ these kind of strategies without any kind of fear, especially if it's wrong to do so. So fear under the Hatch Act that you could lose your job or face penalties there, and then criminal violations as well, because that is a way really to put an end to this again. The lawfare, the politicization of our Justice Department has gone overboard. We can't allow it to continue.